G'day guys, welcome back to the Time Bomb channel, and I hope all is good in your part of the world. Watch review of the Ruhla Space Control Solar Ref 4640M1. It's a fairly newish release, and the lovely people over at First Class Watches have lent this one into the channel, so huge thank you for them, because for me also this is my first experience of the newer rulers, a newer sort of hands-on. And I say that because if you spent hours trawling through eBay looking at watches, and perhaps older watches, you may have come across a Ruhla Umph, some watches that perhaps look a little bit like this one. However, in the last couple of years, the brand has been reborn and released some new versions of their older classics, and the Space Control is one of those, and the name Space comes from the first German astronaut and German watch in space, but more on that in a moment. Let me just pause and zoom in a fraction more. All right, so keeping with tradition, let's kick off with some key specs. These are 40 mils across only, but they do wear much larger on wrist because of the case body itself and the particular shape. North to south, for example, it is 50 mils, and that's to the end of those integrated links there. It is just a very manageable 12 mils deep. Yeah, lug measurement probably not that relevant, because this is the integration. We do get sapphire up top, but as you can see, I don't think there's a huge amount of AR on it, because it doesn't matter what light you're in, it's picking up a lot of reflections. Comes with 100 meters worth of watery goodness, and buzzing away inside is the solar powered Seiko Epson VS55 movement. Now this particular range comes in 4 different colors. Obviously there is this white version here, and there's something a little bit more blingy with this white and gold, and then the next 2 colors feature very dark colors. There's this very dark blue with the sunburst from the center, and then also this deep red wine version. They retail, I think, for around $349, but again, I would always ask First Class Watches for a price matching on that one. And one of the reasons why I sort of was keen to look at this one, because aesthetically, to my eyes even, the watch looks very clean, it's very clear, and it sits particularly well on wrist. And again, I think that's primarily down to that case design. But as I mentioned before, it is quite a much larger footprint on wrist print than a standard 40 miller. But I think, yeah, I mean, I really like the way it hugs the wrist, and the integration as well, I think looks quite decent. But yeah, my wrist is 7¼ inch, just for reference, and as I say, I think it sits much larger than your standard 40 miller. So onto the dial, just so that we can get look at some of those specifics in more detail. The alignment of the Rehort against the hour markers, I think, looks decent. Everything seems to match up fairly well there. Yep, that's pretty decent. Although the 9 o'clock, the more I look at it, it's just maybe, is it a fraction the other way around? Anyway, very minor details. It's an odd choice to include the charge meter there over at the 9 o'clock, that extra complication, but I think that's quite interesting, because watch nerds may appreciate that. The date window, as you can see, is quite small, nestles in there quite well, but I think because it's color matched in that sense, it's fairly easy to read. It does say made in Germany at the bottom, but again, I'm wondering if that means assembled in Germany. Because yeah, we all know how watch companies sort of get around that. The integrated bracelet, as I mentioned before, I think it looks pretty decent. It feels quite good. It's a little on the jingly jangly side, but again, nothing unmanageable. The clasp, though, however, is a bit of a disappointment. You know, it's Seiko level pressing, Casio level pressing, and you can find this type of class on £100 Casio. So again, a little bit disappointing, and I think for the price point they could have done better. I mean, it closes well, etc., and you don't have any issues in that sense. You've got a fairly decent number of micro adjusts there as well. But as I say, just that little bit on the inside, a little bit poor. But yeah, otherwise, sorry, I'm not taking the full plastics off, as I say, because it is a loaner. Push pins there as well. But yeah, so you've got a couple of adjusts there at the top as well. The loom is okay. It's on the hands and the hour markers, and it's quite clean, and it's fine. As opposed to being, heavy duty, but again, it's not that sort of dive style watch. So again, onto the case back, and we can see the old, I'll throw up a close up here so you can see that better. So you've got the old factory, and I think, yeah, that sort of ties in quite nicely with the next section, which will be around the background to the brand themselves. They've been recreated by a company called Point Tech. It seems that Point Tech also are responsible for Iron Annie, Zeppelin and Bauhaus, and a few others sitting under that new parent brand. However, the Ruhla brand itself dates back to all the way back to 1862. Very old traditional German brand. They made pocket watches, as you'd expect around that time, but they produced huge numbers. This particular model of the Fearless, and the history says that they produced up to 4,000 of these pocket watches a day. Now that's an awful lot of pocket watches. If you multiply that by 365 days in the year, most of those were sold to the US market. So to our American cousins watching today, keep an eye on those thrift markets, because you may find one of the Fearlesses. Between 1946 and 1952, the factory came under the control of the Soviets. So that impacted quite heavily on the direction and design of the watches. Back in German management in 1952, and again, still producing huge numbers of watches. And this is where the space reference comes in. In 1978, Sigmund Jahn, the first German astronaut, took 4 Ruhla watches with him into space. I think 1 was for him and 3 was for the Russian cosmonauts that he flew with. And then in the 1980s, Ruhla again were at the high point, apparently employing over 8,000 people, producing huge numbers of watches. Some very, very cool digis and retro-style watches. I do like those digis very much indeed. Problems appeared, though, for the company in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, reunification 1990, massive market shifts, and probably Ruhla were a little bit too large, top-heavy, and not very cost-effective. With their last watches then being made in 1991. So I think, in summary, if you're looking to buy a Ruhla watch, you've probably got 3 categories. You've got these new revived ones. You've then perhaps got the Soviet era, and then the vintage pre-World War II ones. I mean, I'm certainly keen to see how the brand progresses with this reviving. I hope they can focus on sort of matching, maximum quality aspects like the clasp and the movement. But as I say, aesthetically, I think I was quite impressed with the looks of the watch. I think, yeah, there's a couple of areas for them to improve upon. But yeah, decent first offerings from that recreation. If you do speak to First Class Watches, of course, about this or any other watch, do mention the Time Bomb channel, as I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. And thanks, as always, for your time and for your view. And we'll catch you all in the next watch vid. Cheers, guys.